And knowing that it's way more than just a financial asset, right? Bitcoin it's a profound philosophical shift. The decentralization, self-sovereignty, empowerment and inclusion. There's too big a portion of the world that's still unbanked or underbanked. Too many people that are still, oppressed financially. I'm going to be very careful around this one in today's world, right? But there's a classic quote about something along the lines of what some call criminals, others call freedom fighters. I don't want to go, don't want to be pushing anybody over the edge into anarchy here or anything like that. But there's countries in the world where, for example, women still can't own things or have a bank account. It wasn't that many years, a surprisingly few number of years, way, way, way less time than most people think, that women couldn't have a bank account in this country without, their husband signing for them. And there's still a lot of places in the world where that's true. And Bitcoin breaks that barrier, right? Bitcoin creates the opportunity for people to be paid for their efforts and their work. Bitcoin creates an opportunity for people to buy into a store of value that does outpace inflation.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Source, your #1 destination for everything Bitcoin. I am Daru, your host for today's thought-provoking session, and we are thrilled to have with us today Dirk Anderson. Dirk is a visionary in the crypto space with over 2 decades of expertise in information security and compliance. He is on a mission to turn complex challenges in the blockchain space into profitability for investors. He also plays a pivotal role in the development of the Certified Bitcoin Professional Certification through C4. We're going to dive deep into how Dirk sees the evolving world of Bitcoin, Web3, and blockchain technology. Without further ado, let's get into this episode with Dirk Anderson. Yes, so Dirk, let's get this thing started. You have over 2 decades of experience in information security and compliance. Before diving into the blockchain world, what initially piqued your interest in Bitcoin, and how did your journey from traditional security and compliance evolve into blockchain technology?
Yeah, when I look back at it, it almost seems like kind of just an organic or natural progression. Like you said, I spent a couple of decades, actually probably more like 25 years, doing traditional information security, both in the telecommunication industry and then for a consulting company that's now one of the largest independent IT audit companies in the US. And I spent a lot of time working with cryptography, applied cryptography, protecting online transactions, some payment card industry, credit card stuff, HIPAA data. And so always just kind of a fan, grew up like many little kids with my code books and playing with codes and ciphers. When Bitcoin came along, when I kind of got introduced to Bitcoin, it just seemed kind of like I said, a natural progression. It's just kind of the coolest use of applied cryptography, right? It's not just keeping a message secret. It's not just protecting like your credit card data, but the elegance of the Bitcoin white paper and how it applied the use of several different mathematical and cryptographic technologies just really struck me as a bit of finesse, right? I mean, it's an 8-page. I keep it over my shoulder here, obviously, because it's just something that means so much to me at this point in my life. But the 8 pages, if you don't count the footnotes at the end, that's just pretty much pure elegance. And so when I had a buddy who was the CIO at the time at Salt Blockchain called me up and asked me to come help build a security and compliance program for him there, I kind of jumped at the chance, and that was my beginning of going down the rabbit holes, as the common parlance.
Yes, that's an amazing story, Dirk. And you've done a lot of things in the space. Like, you have years and years and years of experience, probably longer than I've been alive. And I'm always curious to know, like, this new venture that you have, which is Imagine Crypto. It's kind of doing this thing where you're transforming the blockchain challenges into these more secure and compliant opportunities. How do you define the success for those investors and innovators?
Yeah, so you don't have to make me sound that old. Imagine Crypto is young, right? So I left Salt at the end of last year and started up Imagine Crypto in the first quarter of this year, just kind of as a consulting opportunity to work really specifically with folks that want to get into the space. So investment bankers, venture capitalists, or even just, businesses that are looking to expand into blockchain and crypto technologies. they tend to have, their traditional evaluation methodologies. So they've got the finance people who are going to look at all of the financial records of the organization and how it's actually doing as far as money making and that sort of thing. They're going to have their traditional IT folks and even IT security that they're going to look at. But that's really around protecting the proprietary data, the more traditional information assets of an organization. And what they don't really have a lot of times is a good, solid methodology and way to look at the actual crypto integration, whether that is looking at how they're actually, custodying assets or looking at what blockchains they're integrating with and what they're doing with them. And so there's a lot of risk, associated in not understanding those things because they are core to a lot of these, crypto businesses. And so my goal is to help those companies evaluate those things, not necessarily make, yay or nay calls on whether they want to invest, but to at least understand, on day one, where there are risks there, where there's opportunities there, and, what they're kind of getting themselves into from that piece of the business. Just to, to kind of answer your question there about, what success looks like, I think ultimately is, success is them getting a return on their investment from a well thought out, innovative, clever new idea, and not just buying themselves into a money pit or a really high risk situation where the controls around the protection of the digital assets are just not adequate.
Yeah, and I was going to say quickly, Dirk, that I love that idea, and I think that there is a lot of, I guess you could say, scrutiny around the security concerns of crypto and Bitcoin, because people like to separate the two. But I think now, because you see the ETFs, you see more people talking about it, whether it's politicians. I think people are generally curious about crypto, but they are a little bit concerned about the fair share of scrutiny over security concerns, especially in the early days, right? So from your extensive background in security, what do you see as the biggest threat to Bitcoin's future security landscape?
So I think the most important thing for people to remember is that, we see lots of news stories, lots of issues about security issues and fraud and stolen crypto and all this stuff. And I think the most important thing to remember with Bitcoin in particular, at least, is that those have never been security issues or flaws in the underlying technology itself, right? The Bitcoin network, the cryptographic algorithms and mathematics in use to protect Bitcoin, that's never been flawed, right? That's not broken. What happens is people use it badly, just like anything else, right? The failures that we see are the failures to manage custody effectively. People lose keys, people stolen. You have hot wallet, abuse or misuse where too large a percentage of assets or too many dollars are sitting in wallets that are directly connected to the internet and accessible. You see, like in anything else, you see phishing attacks where people at companies get scammed basically and willingly give up access to things that they shouldn't give up access to because all of the appropriate controls aren't in place there. So I think it's really important to remember that, right? That it's not the cryptographic algorithm around Bitcoin that is flawed. It's not Bitcoin that is vulnerable, just like any asset, right? Whether you put your money in a bank or you keep your money in a mattress, right? There's risks associated with how you're storing it and how you're using it, and that's where the flaws or where the security issues tend to pop up and come into play. I will say there are some cryptographic algorithms, right? There's new projects coming out all the time, and there have been some of those that are flawed fundamentally, right? In their architecture. Obvious one of the last couple of years, right, is around like algorithmic stablecoins and some of the designs of those with like Terra Luna. And so there is the possibility for, a project to not be securely designed from the foundation. But that's not the case with all the stuff we hear about Bitcoin. So I think that the biggest threat to Bitcoin's future security is that application of, one, the traditional security layers around the controls, right? So who has the passwords, who owns the keys or who carries the keys? How are those keys protected? How many keys are required in order to be able to move assets around? How many people have those keys? How geographically diverse or disparate are they? Those sorts of questions. But in the math, the great phrase is, in math we trust, right? The actual math and algorithms around it, those aren't the things that keep people that actually work with it awake at night. It's the people failures and the application failures.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, Dirk. And, as this thing becomes more ubiquitous, you're going to start to see more regulatory frameworks being developed around blockchain, right? And it makes me think about like Elizabeth Warren, where she's like very anti cold stored wallet. She doesn't believe that people have enough trust in themselves to keep their private keys secured. And I wanted to hear like your thought process on that. Like, how do you think the intersection of compliance and security will shape the mainstream adoption of like crypto going forward with these kind of security frameworks that you mentioned?
Yeah, no, I think that's really valid. And I think that is one of the biggest issues we have right now, right? I will tell anybody who will listen to me that I think it's just ridiculous and absurd that Bitcoin and crypto have become a political divide, right? It just doesn't make any sense, because many of the things that drew me to Bitcoin in the first place are super progressive ideas, right? It's the ability to be able to make transborder payments to enable people that are unbanked or underbanked to actually be able to take some control over their own, financial future and wealth building, which is really, at the end of the day, kind of a anti-bank and super liberal sort of concept. And so the fact that one party has kind of latched onto this, I find frustrating here in the US anyways, right? So
Hey, it's Daru from the Bitcoin Source, and if you're a podcaster like me, you know how important it is to have a website that represents your show professionally. That's why I want to introduce you to Podpage, the absolute best website builder made specifically for podcasters. What I love about Podpage is just how easy it is. No headaches, no coding. You just plug in your podcast feed and it builds a stunning professional website just for you, complete with all your episodes and reviews and even contact forms for users to sign up on. Now, I have to keep it real. We are all busy in this crazy tech-based heavy world. Other platforms make you do all the heavy lifting, but Podpage updates your website every time you post a new episode. Plus, it integrates Apple, Google, and Spotify reviews so your audience can see your latest ratings right on the website. If you're serious about having a podcast, this should be a non-negotiable, and Podpage makes that effortless. So if you're ready to level up your podcast, easy to build, beautifully designed website, I highly recommend Podpage. Give it a try. You won't be disappointed. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, so I think, we are starting to see the more regulation, and I think that's going to be a big help as it gets refined and done right. It turns out that being your own bank can actually be hard, right? When you're responsible for everything, and there are, the immutability of the blockchain means there's no clawing back funds. Once you send them or once they're taken, they're gone, and you can't get them back. And so you actually have to dig into, really understanding what you're doing, how to do it, what the risks are, do your own research, right? And I think that we're going to continue to see both regulation and industry standards, things like you mentioned, C4 that I work with, the Cryptocurrency Certification Consortium. One of the things that we've built there and publish is the Cryptocurrency Security Standard, and there's a certification for people to audit against that. A great foundational standard for determining if an organization is doing good key management, solid key management, and protecting the assets, either their own assets, but also in particular for those organizations that are working with other people's assets, that they are doing an adequate job of protecting those. We're going to see more of those sorts of things. We're going to see, I think, things like the CCS kind of get integrated into. We've already seen this in a few countries around the world where those sorts of standards get integrated into some of the audit and analysis for licensing and that sort of thing for businesses to do transactions in the crypto space. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And it's not just the traditional security that people need to be looking at, right? The traditional security challenges, like I mentioned before. It's really kind of taking a look at some of the new security vulnerability areas, attack vectors that exist because of how crypto works, and getting those integrated into the more standard, more comprehensive security standards.
100%. And I think that was just a great answer, and that's hopefully my audience can definitely utilize that to make smart decisions about their security around crypto, because I think a lot of people like the upside of crypto and number go up and finding out what new token is coming out. But then if you get rug pulled or you get hacked, then it's like, oh, I need to look into what Dirk is doing to figure out how to try to get my money back, which is not possible at this current moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult and very unlikely. I mean, you hear the occasional story about, somebody did it to prove a point and they sent the money back, or, and we're starting to see kind of some of these bounty things where it's like, hey, send 80% of the money back and, you can take the other 20% and we won't pursue prosecution, that sort of thing, going on. I don't know whether I agree with that, specifically ethically. I think all those decisions have to be made very much in the context of the circumstances and the organization, at that moment in time. But yeah, I mean, the likelihood, once something's happened, the likelihood that you recover your assets is a lot slimmer than it is in the traditional banking world. And that's the trade-off for the self-sovereignty that you gain and the independence that you gain by being able to do that yourself.
100%. Like, I don't know if you've been keeping up with this, Dirk, but there was just some guys in Miami that just hacked like an enormous amount of Bitcoin, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it was like 230 million. And like, they found out who they were. It was like a young kid. Like, I think he was under 25 years old. And it's like, that person's never going to get that money back. I mean, he's obviously going to go to jail, but your money's gone. So I definitely agree with that for sure.
Yeah, definitely the challenge, right? And I think the challenge of the fact that it still is a growing industry, right? And there are absolutely still growing pains, and we're still figuring out how to do some of these things. But that's also what makes it exciting. I think it's what draws a lot of people to it, especially folks that want to get into developing in DeFi and that sort of thing. So,
yep. So Dirk, I know you're of course in the business of making these complex challenges profitable for investors, and just understandably, just in layman's terms, make sense for people that don't have this high technical aptitude for what we're talking about. I wanted to know, like, where do you see crypto, Bitcoin fitting into the broader financial landscape over the next 10 years or so? Is it still primarily a store of value to you, or do you see it evolving beyond that?
Yeah, and it's always hard to predict the future, but I feel like it already is evolving beyond that, slowly. With the trading capacity that came with the approval of ETFs around Bitcoin, and with some of the other things that are being built on and around the ecosystem, I think we're starting to see more potential for integration and use cases. It's still slow, I think, right? So I think, I think the volatility of it has to go down, right, in order for it to become more useful in non-just store of value ways, more as a exchange of value. But we're going to see that, right? That's built into it, right? With the halvings that will continue to go on, will help stabilize the overall value as time progresses. And I see it becoming more use as a tool of for global settlement mechanisms, especially with the institutional adoption. It's a lot faster and easier to settle up across borders and halfway around the world, and it's a lot cheaper to do it through a tool like Bitcoin. And we're starting to see some projects building specifically to do that, right? Kind of just on road or onboarding, offboarding platforms on two ends that just, are using crypto back and forth in the middle to allow that sort of settlement. And I think we're going to continue to see it actually become a currency in distressed economies, places like El Salvador, where they legalized it in, 2021, I think. The Central African Republic, the unofficial use of it in places like Argentina and Venezuela. I think we're going to see it continue to be used where it is useful to people, right? I think it's going to be kind of a market demand for a while still. But as the regulatory landscape continues to get settled out, as the volatility continues to reduce over time, then I think those things will become a lot better. And I think we'll, continue to see deeper integration with DeFi, whether that is, Bitcoin specifically, whether it's using like wrapped Bitcoin or actually just like layer 2 protocols being built on top of Bitcoin that provide that sort of functionality. I think we'll continue to see more automation for things that currently are more traditional banking type processes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, from a first world perspective, living in the US or Europe, you have the US dollar, which a lot of people think Bitcoin is competing with, but I think from my perspective, it's more of a store of value for us versus a use case for someone in El Salvador that needs it for remittances or day-to-day, payments.
Right.
And that kind of leads to my next question, Dirk, which is there's some crucial things that people need to know when they consider just getting into crypto or getting into Bitcoin. What advice would you give someone that's just starting to invest into this digital asset?
I think you have to do a lot of do your own research, right, before you fall down the rabbit hole. And I'll, of course, make the standard disclaimer here. One, that I'm not a finance guy, right? I'm a technologist, as you said, right? I'm an information security professional. I've wound up doing those in some finance-related industries like lending, but don't take this as financial advice. Having said that, the advice I would always give someone just starting to invest in Bitcoin specifically, of course, is buy now. Right? Don't worry about where the value is. What is it? Michael Saylor says about, he's going to be buying at the top for the rest of his life. The best time to invest is today, as Andreas says. If you're just trying to like invest in Bitcoin, if you want to, have a digital asset or have any sort of an asset that actually is outpacing inflation instead of, falling slowly behind it, do that now. But you absolutely just have to do your own research. And especially if you're starting to look into, like I was talking about earlier, investing into other projects or businesses in the crypto industry or in the crypto space, then, really need to dig in and understand exactly how they're interacting with blockchains, how they're managing their cryptographic keys that are securing all of their digital assets, how they're moving those assets around, what platforms they're using. There's a lot of those sorts of things that you need to understand. And you just need to understand, if you're just kind of starting to dive down the rabbit hole, is what those fundamentals that, cryptocurrencies and blockchains bring you. What does it mean to say it's decentralized, and how does that impact you, right? What does it mean to say it's immutable? And especially, what does it mean to say that it's transparent, right? There's an awful lot of people still that, they think that the reason that Bitcoin is being used for, ransomware and other crimes is that it's, untraceable and anonymous. And that's just not true. Far more traceable than a dollar is, even dollars through an awful lot of the global banking system, because everybody can see every single transaction that's taken place. You have to be able to, figure out who's on the ends of those transactions. But once you figure that out, the transactions and all the ins and outs, you don't have to find that hidden second ledger book, that turns up in all of the mystery TV shows and stuff, right? It's all there.
For sure, I agree with that. I always love to hear your expertise on this, Dirk, but I want to talk about something that I think is very near and dear to my heart, an organization that I truly love, which is C4. You're heavily involved in the Certified Bitcoin Professional Program, which is designed to certify Bitcoin expertise in a way. How did the idea for CBP come about, and why is this certification important for professionals in the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, obviously I am. I'm very involved there. I'm both on the Certified Bitcoin Professional Committee as well as on the Cryptocurrency Security Standard Committee. When C4 was founded by Michael Perklin, Josh McDougall, Andreas Antonopoulos, and Pamela Morgan, the goal was to create a nonprofit organization to provide education in the space, right? So this is fairly early on in the crypto timeline, and they really wanted to just make sure that people had that education, right? That they understood those things a little bit better before they put themselves at risk. And one of the first things to come out of that then was the Certified Bitcoin Professional certification. And the goal of that was really to be kind of a baseline of knowledge, right? For people to be able to demonstrate that they understood the fundamentals. And so if you were looking to bring somebody in and hire them, especially if maybe you're one of those organizations that we were talking about earlier, where you're looking at investing in, a project or growing out a project or building something, right? And you want to understand this, you don't have that expertise and knowledge already. And therefore you want a way of saying, hey, this person, they're not just throwing, BS terms at me and trying to snow me, right? They have this cert. it demonstrates that they have at least a basic understanding of how this all works. And the CBP is still largely that, right? Since then, there have been some other certifications that have come out of C4, but the CBP kind of still remains that I've got the fundamentals, right? I understand how blockchain works. I understand how mining works and what it means to be decentralized. I understand, the transparency and immutability of the ledger and how that works at a high level. You don't have to understand all of the mathematics. You don't have to be able to program, mining node software or anything like that. You just have to be able to understand, fundamentally how these things work. And so that was the goal of the CBP, and largely remains the goal of the CPP at this point. And I think will for a while, because it's still, a nascent industry.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, Dirk. And for me, the CBP certification was very instrumental because I'm a podcaster. I'm someone that's speaking on these topics on a daily basis. And I kind of wanted to make sure that my audience could trust me and they could verify through proof of work that I actually know what I'm talking about. So I've said this to you probably. I've said this to Jessica Levesque before, where like C4 is always my ground zero foundation for being certified in this space. It's helped me get jobs in the Bitcoin space. It's helped me become a better speaker and podcaster in the space. So I'm always grateful to C4, and I'm just grateful to have you on here to kind of give people a breakdown of exactly what that program is about and why it's important if you are interested in this industry.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It's obviously great to hear you say that. There are lots of educational resources out there, and some of them are fantastic. Some of them, other resources by people that are involved with C4, for starters, like Jameson Lopp, right, puts out a lot of good educational content. But there's other resources out there, and we partner with some of those resources over the years to try and educate folks at conferences and that sort of thing. And so, I feel like this is still a space where there is plenty of room for lots of players to be out there that, that aren't necessarily competing with each other, but building off of each other.
For sure. Dirk, let's talk about Web3. So you help businesses navigate the challenges of Web3 and blockchain technologies. How do you see Web3 shaping the future of the internet? And what role do you believe Bitcoin will play in this new digital ecosystem?
So that's one of the harder ones, right? Again, because you're prognosticating a bit, trying to predict the future. Web3 overall, right? So one of my writing partners is got his doctorate in AI. And so he and I have been writing a whole bunch of stuff lately about the intersection of cryptocurrencies or blockchain along with AI and then specifically security and the security of data. And I think that one of the things that we're going to see with Web3 is the continuing decentralization of data, right? Blockchain and Bitcoin brought us a decentralization of monetary data and digital assets, financial assets. But I think we're going to continue to see that with Web3. I think we're seeing a lot of it in AI right now. There's a lot of projects out there that are trying to figure out ways to securely and safely distribute and offload the data and the models being used by AI, because right now that all sits in literally a handful of places, right? And so there's a handful of big companies that just have access potentially to all of that data, and so that scares some people, and not that's maybe rightly so. But so I think we're going to continue to see that, try looking at ways to continue to distribute and decentralize more than just financial data. And in the process, giving more control to the real data owners, right? To the person whose data that actually is, whether that is in advertising type control, like we're seeing on some of the social media projects that are being built on blockchain, or things like there's a company here in Denver, Burst IQ, that is doing that with medical data, right? Health data. So that you have the ability to actually control who has access to exactly what health data. You don't just have to give them your entire health history. And if somebody's potentially going to monetize that, maybe you're monetizing that, right? If somebody wants to do a big research study and they need all of this data, the people whose data it is, potentially benefit from that instead of just some big organization that's collected all of that data. So I think we'll continue to see that, which is going to give us, I think, more meaningful, kind of human to machine and machine to machine business models as well. And I think that we'll see Bitcoin continue to be, the foundational digital store of value underneath or underlying all of that.
Yeah, thinking about it in that sense, it kind of seems like you're creating like a firewall for your public information. When you think about innovations in this like centralized finance or DeFi, which is like a big buzzword right now. There's a lot of Web3 projects. How do you think, Dirk, that Bitcoin's decentralized nature will compare to these newer systems? Do you think Bitcoin can integrate seamlessly into this ecosystem, or will it stand apart?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think so. So one of the challenges Bitcoin has, right, is that by design, it's pretty static, right? Focused on being a store of value and a medium of exchange. And so unlike a lot of other crypto projects that are out there, which are really designed for flexibility and for, to kind of build dynamic, Ethereum, right, is a distributed computing machine, right? Not necessarily a money like Bitcoin is. And so fundamentally it works very differently. I think that makes Bitcoin not difficult to integrate, but I think what we're going to see is things integrating with Bitcoin, right? To maintain that foundational layer, because I don't think you want to mess with that. You don't want to mess with it too much anyways, right? And I think we'll continue to see a lot of layer 2 type products and projects like Lightning, right? That speeds up the process of conducting transactions, allows you to do microtransactions so that you can actually buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin affordably and quickly, right? Not waiting for a settlement. Things like that, I think, will be built on top of it. I think that's how it'll integrate, right? Is that not necessarily that I don't think we're going to see radical changes to Bitcoin in order to be able to integrate with those things. I think we'll see those things integrating with Bitcoin to maintain the stability and the security of that underlying layer of the store of value and exchange.
And, Dirk, at this point, I've talked to at least hundreds of people about Bitcoin, right? And there's many conversations about Bitcoin being the reserve currency of the internet. And this is one of the burning questions I wanted to ask you. In your opinion, how realistic is this idea? And what needs to happen for it to be, come to fruition in your thoughts?
I mean, I think it already is happening. I think it already kind of is, from the standpoint of having, and, again, thinking that in that integrated terminology, having something that's already integrated with the internet, right? That works like the internet. I think it's kind of already there. What I don't think we have is the adoption for it, right? Is the usage, the high levels of usage and adoption around that. For that to continue to grow, I think we have to see the regulatory hurdles overcome. And I think this is true for, whether you're talking about consumer use or investors and innovators, right? We've got to get past those regulatory hurdles. We've got to get some consistency in the approach internationally, right? One of the challenges and why current regulatory approaches don't just plug and play and fit with Bitcoin is the fact that you don't have to exchange dollars for pounds, right? It's Bitcoin here, it's Bitcoin in London, it's Bitcoin in Paris, it's Bitcoin in Mumbai. It doesn't matter where you are, it's Bitcoin, and it just works. And so I think we do have a ways to go in trying to refine the financial system to be able to look at Bitcoin and other crypto assets and apply what are the necessary rules to keep it safe and use it effectively, without trying to just shoehorn in things that don't work, without trying to just, stifle it or shut it down. So, getting through that process I think that's just a process of time for a lot of places. And obviously the volatility, right? In order to really become a more useful method of exchange, whether that's directly or through, layer 2 technologies, the volatility has to settle down. That will, by design, again, over time. And so I think to some degree it's, kind of playing the waiting game, and along the way, growing the adoption. And I think that is just a matter of continuing to build simple, easy to use, and critically safe and secure tools, right? If you're going to be your own banker, you need to have some tools to help you do that make it really easy for you to not accidentally lose or expose your keys that are protecting your assets.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And Dirk, I love to hear success stories, right? And You've been at Salt Lending for a number of years, and you've worked closely with businesses to help turn blockchain challenges into opportunities. What's an example, or if you have any examples, of a particularly challenging situation you helped a client navigate? And how did Bitcoin or other cryptos in this case play a role in that success?
Yeah, and I think I'll actually go back to my time at Salt for that one, because one of the things that Salt itself is a bit of a success story in simply still being around, right? It's kind of the OG lending platform. It is a CeFi type of lending platform, right? But Salt looked at itself as kind of a bridging company initially, right? To make it easier for people to stay long in crypto by holding it, but still being able to get liquidity out of it. So you're a miner, you want to reinvest, you're making all this Bitcoin, you want to reinvest in the growth of your company, but you don't want to have to sell your Bitcoin to do that, right? You borrow against it. And as long as it's outpacing not only inflation, but your interest rates over time, right? It's a win-win situation for everybody. But one of the real challenges to borrowing against a cryptocurrency is the volatility, right? That we've been talking about. And so one of what I think was just a huge success at Salt was when we rolled out the stabilization platform. When I was the CTO there, we rolled out a tool that instead of just automatically liquidating people when the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever else you were using to borrow against on the platform fell at what would normally be a liquidation point for everybody else, what we did is convert it into a stablecoin to hold the value of your asset there without actually liquidating it all back into US dollars, which has some potential tax ramifications. And so we were able to convert it into a stablecoin, lock the value in at that point, give you time then to come back, add some additional assets onto the platform, cure, the loan to value levels, and then as the Bitcoin or whatever went back up, to just buy back in, right? To convert back into the coin that you really wanted to be in. You might lose a little bit of value in the timing of those things, but you don't just get liquidated out of your holdings when what you really want is to be long in crypto.
Wow, that's different. I've never heard that before. Instead of being liquidated, putting it into a stable coin, like you're talking like a USDC or USDT, right? Like this you're talking about?
Yep.
It's interesting.
And that would just happen automatically, right? You'd get the notice instead of saying, hey, at the end of the day, it's kind of fundamentally the same thing, but by doing it that way, it creates the leverage and the power to convert back in, as opposed to just paying off your loan and being done, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a pioneering move right there, Dirk. I really like to hear that. That's interesting. So, Dirk, we're going to close this up pretty soon. So I want to have a few more questions for you. So, Dirk, of course, from this conversation we've had, it's clear that you're passionate about the future of crypto, Web3, Bitcoin, and its transformation and power that it can exude for people that want to change their lives on the digital finance front. As we wrap up, there's one key message that you would like to leave for the audience. I'm curious to hear it. And whether you're a Bitcoin investor, innovator, or just curious about the space, is there any kind of like messages you have for us out here?
From my perspective, and I try not to try and impose my wisdom too strongly on others, because, I've only been in this industry for, I started at Salt in 2018, early 2018. There's a lot of people who are way smarter than me out there in the crypto sphere. But my advice to anyone getting started, or even if they're already heavily involved, is just to stay curious, right? Go down the rabbit hole. It's the only way you learn. Don't just settle for the news cycle hype and headlines, right? Even if you just actually read the articles, 9 times out of 10, you'll be like, oh, okay, so that headline didn't exactly tell the whole story, right? What really happened here, Bitcoin isn't broken. Nobody hacked Bitcoin or whatever, right? That's what really happened here. Doesn't line up with the headline at all. So, just staying curious and knowing that it's way more than just a financial asset, right? Bitcoin it's a profound philosophical shift. The decentralization, self-sovereignty, empowerment, and inclusion. There's too big a portion of the world that's still unbanked or underbanked. Too many people that are still, oppressed financially. And to be very careful around this one in today's world, right? But there's There's a classic quote about something along the lines of what some call criminals, others call freedom fighters. I don't want to go, don't want to be pushing anybody over the edge in anarchy here or anything like that. But there's countries in the world where, for example, women still can't own things or have a bank account. It wasn't that many years, a surprisingly few number of years, way, way, way less time than most people think, that women couldn't have a bank account in this country without, their husband signing for them. And there's still a lot of places in the world where that's true. And Bitcoin breaks that barrier, right? Bitcoin creates the opportunity for people to be paid for their efforts and their work. Bitcoin creates an opportunity for people to buy into a store of value that does outpace inflation. And so, even though Bitcoin isn't really in its infancy anymore, we're still kind of in the toddler years, right? I think we're wobbling along, not quite ready to run yet and figuring this stuff out. And so just stay curious and keep learning and always dig a little deeper.
Love it, Dirk. That's why we do what we do, right?
Absolutely.
And lastly, Dirk, where can our audience follow your work and stay updated with Imagine Crypto, all the other projects that you're working on in the Bitcoin and blockchain space?
So I post a lot of stuff to LinkedIn, a lot of articles, and you'll find links to most of my articles there. I have a Substack also under Three Waves Watch. That's the articles that I'm co-writing with Hunter Albright. So you can find a lot of the stuff there as well. But yeah, mostly you can always check out Imagine Crypto, but that's very specifically for business consulting for the most part. If you're looking for education stuff, you'll find it on LinkedIn. And then, of course, C4, the Cryptocurrency Consortium.org, which is a mouthful, which is why we all say C4. But if you go out there and Google it, tons of resources out there. In addition to the CBP, we have the Certified Ethereum Professional now. We have the CCE, which I'm always trying to remember. It's Cryptocurrency Essentials, which is not a certification. It's more of a training, just, education and training program. So yeah, lots of resources out there.
Thanks, Dirk. That's a wrap for today's episode of The Bitcoin Source. A huge thank you to Dirk Anderson for sharing his deep insights on Bitcoin, blockchain security, and the future of Web3. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Stay tuned for more episodes where we dive into Bitcoin's most exciting and transformative stories. Until next time, this is The Bitcoin Source. Thank you, Dirk, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Dadu.